All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome. We are so excited to have you all here and join us for ISLA's research report on the profile of an Islamic school principal in the United States. We're so excited that you all have participated in this research, and we look forward to sharing the data with you, as well as engaging in a discussion post-presentation on any questions that you have, any further research inquiries that you might have related to this data, and especially how you would like to see this data being used to help you in your school and your practice. This is really, inshallah, everything that we do here at ISLA is meant to empower you as Islamic school leaders and educators, board members, everybody who we've got here, and to support the institution of Islamic education, inshallah. So to the next slide. Just a real quick overview of ISLA. So as many of you know, you've been engaged with ISLA for several years now. ISLA has been around since 1998, so over 20 years now. We've been engaging with full-time Islamic schools, helping them get established, and then you all have collectively supported the mission of ISLA in terms of the networking, engaging on our email listserv, sharing resources. ISLA has been engaged and has a renewed focus on research in Islamic education, as well as professional development. We go out to individual Islamic schools, as well as provide holistic Islamic education or professional development nationwide and beyond that if needed. And in 2021, we are so excited for our focus to be on advancing Islamic education in the United States from research to resources. What this really means is that we have a renewed focus on research in Islamic education. It's always been a core element of our mission, but in 2021, we want to put out, engage in more research and use that research to create resources that support you and your schools, inshallah. You'll be hearing more about that from me, inshallah, in the coming month. Okay, next slide. So one of the core elements of this research component that ISLA is embarking on, particularly in 2021, but started in late 2020, is our pulse surveys. So pulse surveys are meant to be fast, shouldn't take longer than 5 to 7 minutes for you to respond to. They should be relevant and related to issues that you face in your schools, and they should be timely, things that are happening right now, and the reports are meant to come out within enough time for you to be able to utilize the findings in your own practice, inshallah. So as you know, in November 2020, we did the COVID-19 impact on Islamic school enrollment. And thanks to your participation in those surveys, we have now put out a report in Islamic Horizons. We shared the first report with you all. It's on our website. We had a meeting with you. We have had an article in Islamic Horizons, and we just got the proof today for a peer-reviewed journal article in the Journal for Education in Muslim Societies, which is produced by IIIT. So we are telling our story, inshallah, alhamdulillah, through the data and through your engagement in these reports. And we're so excited to have your engagement and support with that. As you know, right now we're gathered to talk about the Islamic school principal profile, and inshallah we're anticipating that towards the end of this academic year we're going to do a pulse survey on your current instructional method and reopening plans for the fall. And that's really to be able to gauge the progress and the development of Islamic schools, our ability and agility to respond to our emerging needs. And we hope that this is all, information that you can use in your communications as you talk to parents and others about the value of Islamic education and Islamic schools in the US.
Next.
So at this point, I would like to now introduce Dr. Isra Brifgani. Isra is ISLA's research associate. She is the gem of ISLA, one of the many gems of ISLA, mashallah. She has her EDD in education and a focus and special interest in whole child development, inspired by the work on tarbiyah. And she is a huge proponent of Islamic schools, mashallah, mashallah, an advocate of them, just generally speaking, and is also utilizing her skills and interests in her local Islamic school as a board member. So at this point, I would like to pass the microphone over. Dr. Isra, if you could go, we're going to move into our research report on the profile of Islamic school principals. Dr. Isra will provide the data found from this. Of course, like I said, inshallah, after this, we'd like to engage in a discussion with you. We will talk about implications and findings, but it's by no means comprehensive. We want you to, we want to use this time to really engage with you, get your feedback, and incorporate that into our final report, which is still in draft mode, but will be sent to you once it's finalized. We are mindful of the time. We will end at the top of the hour. If you have any questions as Dr. Isra is presenting, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will get to them, inshallah, in the discussion section of this presentation.
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. I pray that all of you are doing well and staying healthy and safe, inshallah. So today we are very excited to share with you some very important research that we have conducted at ISLA that inshallah will help paint a more accurate picture of the profile of Islamic school principals in the United States. But before I begin, I would like to give a shout out and thank all the Islamic school principals who participated in the survey. Without that involvement and support, we really would not be able to do this without you. So thank you so much. So we want to think of research as a powerful tool that can help us tell our story, and for this report for the Islamic schools principles, alhamdulillah, in terms of the profile of Islamic school principals, we have analyzed the findings in the report that will help Islamic schools, inshallah, better understand job responsibilities, pay, and inshallah overall improvement of principal hiring across the United States. So the report that we have is very extensive, and inshallah, for the sake of time, I will give a brief overview of the data, and we would love for you, inshallah, all to read the report and use it as a tool for school improvement for your school, inshallah. So to start, inshallah, alhamdulillah, we had participation from 107 principals from across all regions of the United States. So the Northeast, South, Midwest, and the West. Alhamdulillah, and this is 1/3 of the principal population in the United States. So alhamdulillah, we have such rich data to work with, alhamdulillah. So the first thing that we looked at was the gender of Islamic school principals. And we found that the majority of Islamic school principals in the United States are female, 78%. And when we compare this percentage to the average private school in the United States, we find that we have a higher percentage of Islamic school principals who are female. And in terms of education levels of Islamic school principals, again, alhamdulillah, we find that our Islamic school principals have higher education levels than the average private school principal in the United States. So we have 84% of females and 90% of males who have a master's degree or higher in the field of education, compared to 70% with a master's degree in the private school sector. And we find that the master's degree is the most common one among Islamic school principals. So in terms of licensure, we found that 58 principals have a teacher licensure, and we found that 38% of our principals who hold an admin license. So this could mean that many of our Islamic school principals start out as educators and then slowly move their way up to becoming principals of Islamic schools in the US. So alhamdulillah, we also found that the majority of our Islamic school principals are very experienced in the field of education, with 73% having 16 years and above of total experience in the field of education. And mashallah, this is something to be very proud of, alhamdulillah. When it comes to principal experience, we found that Islamic school principals have slightly less experience as principal compared to the average private schools, the average private school principals in the United States, with the most common trend being 1 to 5 years of experience. And when we do a comparison of 10 years or less, we find that 73 principals had 10 years or less of experience. And the average private school principal in the US has around 10 years of experience as principal of a school. For this question, we wanted to see the types of support systems that our Islamic school principals have. So we look at the admin size, and that includes the principal, of course, includes the vice principal, admin assistants, and even academic teams. So we wanted to look at what kind of support systems do our Islamic school principals have. And we found that the majority of Islamic schools in the US have a team, an admin team that consists of 1 to 4 people. And in terms of contracts, this was very interesting. We found that more than half of Islamic school principals have a 1-year contract, and around 30 have no contract. So this was something very interesting to look at. So when it comes to pay and principal salary, we had such rich information and data. So we wanted to present it in a way that is most useful to our Islamic school principals and our Islamic school community. So what we have right here is the average salary for Islamic school principals in the US as a whole. And in the report, what we have done is also we have done it by regions. We have the South, the Midwest, West, and Northeast to take into account the cost of living across the US. So the average Islamic school principal salary in the US is $59,500. Now, when we compare this to the average private school principal salary in the US, we find that the Islamic school principals are getting paid less, as the average principal salary in private schools is around $72,000 annually. So to give us a better understanding of where we have most of the salaries on the spectrum or on the graph, we look at the average within one standard deviation. So between 38,000 and 80,000 is where we find most of these salaries on the graph. And then we have the outliers, which are on the low side, and then outliers, which are on the more higher side as well. So for the US as a whole, and for all the different regions in the US, we have broken down the salaries by the highest male salary, highest female, and then the average male and female salaries, as well as the lowest male and female salaries. So to look at the highest male salary in the US is around 105,000, and the highest female salary in the US, Islamic school principal salary in the US, is around 100,000. So we don't see a huge gap there, but when we look at the averages, we can see a bigger gap. So the average male salary in the US is 74,000, and the average female salary in the US is 55,000. Now to look at the low end of the spectrum, for males is 40,500, and for females is 25,000 or less. And just to note on that, some of the principals had put comments that they opt and they choose to take a lower salary to help Islamic schools financially. So that's their way to help their Islamic schools, which is a huge thing, mashallah. So I will not be able to go over the different regions, but inshallah in the report you will be able to see that breakdown. Now, in terms of benefits, when we look at the benefits of Islamic school principles across the US, so the two most common ones are paid sick days and child tuition discounts. Um, but you can see in terms of healthcare, we have less than 50% who are receiving healthcare benefits, and a small percentage with 401k benefits. And when we look at that admin team that we talked about before, and so having a smaller admin team, of course, puts more responsibilities on the principal. So we wanted to see what are the top three responsibilities or the top three things that occupy most of the principal's time. And for this one, the staff support and development was one of the top ones, and then as well as um, positive school culture, but we also can see that managing crisis is also one of the high ones as well. Now, in terms of job satisfaction, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest, we asked the principals to rate their job satisfaction. And mashallah, alhamdulillah, 80% of the principals who took the survey reported a job satisfaction of 4 or more. And despite all the frustrations and the challenges that they have, this really points a picture that many of our Islamic school principals, if not all, are doing this for a higher purpose. In our survey, we had 3 qualitative questions, and this is where the data was so rich and we could just see the voices of the principals coming through the data. So for each of the 3 questions, we analyzed the data into different themes, and in our report, we have all the themes, all the themes listed, but for the sake of time, we could, and for now, we have selected the top 3 for what makes you most happy or what gives you the biggest satisfaction as a principal. And one of the top ones was just knowing that children are happy and getting a great education in an Islamic environment. This was one of the quotes. Basically, fostering that Muslim identity, working with the Muslim kids was one of the top ones. The second one was when you have a qualified staff team. That was one of the second ones. And the third one was just seeing the school mission and vision alive and in action. So these were the top 3. Now, when we talk about the biggest frustrations or the biggest challenges that Islamic school principals have, again, we had many different themes, but these are the top 3 that the Islamic school principals shared with us. The first one being basically the workload and the lack of support. And I felt that this top quote right here really spoke to the voices of many of the principals. And this principle says the scope of the work is far too broad. I'm involved in every aspect of school functions, from changing light bulbs to financial and HR concerns. So I felt that this really came through in the voices of many of the principals. And the second one was basically hiring staff and finding that qualified staff. And we can see that all these 3 different themes are very interconnected with each other. And the third one being finances and limited resources. So this principal is saying the principal is hired to run a school, not to fundraise for the school. It is overwhelming and stressful to place that responsibility on the principal. So these were the top 3 challenges. The last question was a free response. We wanted to give the principals a space to share anything they wanted to share with us, to communicate to the Islamic school community. And the top 3 were the top 3 concerns are shared here. And the first one again being hiring staff. And this principle says the salary that is offered to the teacher is very low, and as such, we don't attract the most qualified staff. And the second one, which is also very much intertwined, is the poor compensation. The pay offered to the principal is not competitive at all. With low pay and lack of support, will not attract or retain good talent. And the third one is the workload, wearing many hats. And I feel like that this quote also really brought the voices of many of the principals just alive. This principle says that given too many responsibilities, substitute teacher, curriculum coordinator, and on and on. So just it goes back to having that small admin team and then the finances of the school. And with that, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all our Islamic school principals who are working very hard day and night to, alhamdulillah, provide Islamic education for children across the country. And with this, I will turn it over to Dr. Shahza Khan to talk about the implications and the recommendations moving forward, inshallah.
Thank you so much. And I know that you all probably have a lot more questions. Feel free to use the chat to start, asking them. There's definitely a lot more that we can take from this data, inshallah, and we look forward to your questions to drive that further analysis. But really, one of the biggest takeaways from this is not exactly related to the data, but just related to the fact that we have this data. And alhamdulillah, it's that we are telling our own story, alhamdulillah. It's that you all participated in this survey to make this data available to be able to tell our story. Alhamdulillah, how many times have we talked to each other, and anecdotally, we know that Islamic school leaders are overworked, wear too many hats, that they're underpaid, that they're highly qualified. Alhamdulillah, that's another piece to the story that we can tell now. And so to get to the actual implications of this study, what we know now is that Islamic school leaders, the principals leading our Islamic schools today, are highly qualified. In fact, more qualified when we're looking at averages. They have higher qualifications and degrees than the average private school leader principal. So this is really exciting news, alhamdulillah, and is a positive, aspect to the story of Islamic education in the United States. This is now, we are not going to contest this in this room right here, mashallah. We know that principals are one of the school's greatest assets. We can definitely agree that they're one of the school's greatest assets, mashallah. And if you look at how much money is invested in any school system, in any industry, really, it's usually salaries. So they're also the greatest asset, and often staff is also the greatest quote unquote expense. However, that kind of leads us to a few other points, that if this is the case, if principals should be and are the greatest asset of a school, including Islamic schools, then we should do our best, board members and the Islamic and Muslim community, to support them in their work by providing them with the staff size that they need, with providing them with competitive and fair salaries, inshallah, and other factors that foster retention. So, definitely is worth further research and analysis to examine, like, what were the factors that caused some people, some responses to say that they were at a 5? Did they have more staff support? Did they have higher salaries? These are all hypotheses to be tested that this report doesn't yet share. So that's definitely another element, but this is definitely something to start with. And in particular, this study gives us benchmarking tools, inshallah, especially the regional specific salaries that you'll see in the actual report that we'll be sharing in a few days. And another implication is that we do need to provide our principals with fair and competitive salaries. So in the implications, I think I speak a little bit more about that. So go to the next slide. And I look forward to your own suggestions on what the other implications of this study and data are. One of the things that came through from the feedback that the principals provided in those open-ended questions is that there absolutely have to be clear boundaries and responsibilities between the board and the principal to be able to increase the efficacy of those principles and I suspect job satisfaction. That's a hypothesis to be tested. The survey also indicates a highly skilled principal pool, and it also indicates gender-based disparity, as somebody noted in the chat. Why does that gender-based disparity exist? Now, anecdotally, we did speak to a few principals who indicated that they were getting paid $25,000 or less. We did a little bit of confidential checking. All of those folks were females. All of those principals were females. And upon asking further, they were secondary income earners. The point, though, and in terms of this recommendation, is that that's any individual's choice, and that should never come from the school board or from those determining salary. Pay should be equitable. It should be based and commensurate with education and experience and talent, inshallah. Also, support staff is another huge factor. The point that quote that Sister Isra, Dr. Isra pulled in the second to last slide about how they wear too many hats and they would like to focus a little more, this principal wrote, I would like to focus a little bit more on improving curriculum, PD, introducing new initiatives and supporting teacher growth and implementation. Well, that can only be done when we have more support staff that can attend to the other tasks such as substitute teaching, or calling up students, maybe students who have disciplinary issues. So there's a lot of different creative ways that I'm sure many schools have figured out how to create some more support capacity, but this is definitely an area that needs more investment, inshallah, from our Islamic schools. So that's it in terms of like really the brief recommendations that I wanted to share, because I really wanted, we wanted to share, leave more time for you all to be able to speak to your thoughts and feedback and ideas. So at this point, I open the discussion and ask you to please feel free to unmute. And Dr. Isra, I would say let's stop the screen share so that we can see each other, inshallah. And I invite you all. I see Layla has a point that has been shared here. Layla, do you want to unmute and state this?
No, I just, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I was just typing that I think you guys rock. This is wonderful. Let me finish that, make it real.
Make it official.
So, no, I think this is really rich data, like you said, and it's incredible. We really do need more. A couple of the questions I had were, one, which I already stated, is the salary in correlation to school size. That's really important because there's such a, I mean, the disparity and the range is so huge. And then the other question, or the other, I guess, comment is the fact that we have more women as principals, but are they the highest decision makers? Are they running, like, are they really running the school? So a lot of times boards and board chairs or board members make the decisions, even though it's a female running the school. And I wonder, of the women running schools, how many are the highest decision makers as far as administrative, like running the school, not board decisions? Like, and there is a difficulty in distinguishing between who makes what decisions in our schools. So those are two major questions that I have. But
Layla,
I think, yes.
Just as an interjection, and just to state the obvious, right, that oftentimes the board are comprised, but we do need data to prove that, to state this factually, the board and board chairs are often males.
So I can tell you from my dissertation research, one of the some of the data I have is that 86% of our teaching staff is female and 25% of our board members are female. And that's actually higher than I thought. But when you look closely at the schools, there seems to be a shift, right? Like most recently, there seems to be a shift in boards that have chairs that have been there for 20 plus years tend to be stagnant. So But there's a lot more to. I think more surveys with more data would be wonderful, and I think we do need more specifics. Like we need the correlations.
Great.
Yes, in regards to the school board, so we had 14 principals who had talked about it being a conflict for them. So the board is either micromanaging or they are putting too much responsibility on the principal, that you will fundraise, you will do all these, like the expectations are so high. So it's just finding that balance of, and as Shaza said, it's just having those clear roles and responsibilities. And I could see through the voices of the principal that just for many schools that does not exist.
Thank you. Dr. Abdul Majid, I saw your hand raised. Oh, sorry, sorry, Dr. Isra, please. I don't mean to.
I have not finished analyzing all that data, but I can tell you that that's not always the case. A large school does not equate to higher pay. That's what I found, but inshallah, this will be a follow-up, inshallah, that we will put in the report.
Thank you, Dr. Isra. Dr. Abdul Majid? I saw his hand. Go ahead, yes.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakumullah khair for this research. I have two questions, but the second question I will save it for later on, inshallah, shortly. So it was an excellent research, mashallah, very much needed to open eyes, although everybody should be aware of that. But this is most likely a strong message to the decision makers, the boards, to be more specific. My question here, I think the research missed one important piece, and if it was there, it would be wonderful, which is the missing question is whether or not the school receives voucher, because that makes a big difference in the salary. So it's a comment, it's not really a question, but my second question I will save it for a few minutes after to enrich the discussion. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair. You know, this is a really difficult part with pulse surveys because they have to be fast. And the other thing that was difficult for us, we didn't want to ask very specific information. We chose to ask you all about where you're located by region versus state, because if we would have done state, we would have been able to determine that. Yeah. We asked by region just to be able to guard and protect the confidentiality of all of our survey respondents. I mean, another limitation, huge limitation, I think here is, or question to be answered, inshallah, in further research is, what's the race and ethnicity of our principals? How many have been born and raised in Western culture societies or the United States? These are also other questions that have a lot of implications that go with them, underlying assumptions. But yeah, absolutely. That's a great question and a really good point. Yeah, there's a lot of factors affecting and determining the pay, and this isn't conclusive data.
Yeah.
Should I ask my second question or I leave it for?
Sure.
Go for it, Dr. Abdul Majid. Go.
Basically, I mean, wallahi, I strongly encourage this research. This is the area I personally love so much, and I would encourage everybody to work individually and collectively and as a team. For the ISLA and the CISNA, and Sister Leila maybe can speak on behalf of CISNA. I mean, I believe that we need like kind of a research unit or a team, but it looks like, of course, it has always to be an initiative, and then the group would embrace it and empower it. Now the question is, how is the research conducted within CISNA and ISLA? Is there like to be more straightforward in terms of transparency? I mean, selecting the people who do research, and also the equivalent for the ISB when we do master or PhD or whatever, or EDD, there is the ISB documents. So I would like to know more about that.
Let me take this.
So maybe that's my question is clear enough. I mean, in terms of, or is it just like an open style research, whoever come, or there is a stipend, or people just like volunteers, or like it's, I think more guidance and stuff. Although people can do that on their own too, or with the different teams. Just like I want to know more specifically about CISNA and ISLA, because they're taking the lead, and we support them, very strongly, and we advocate for them, and they are doing a wonderful job, because pretty much before CISNA and ISLA, the schools and the teachers, they did not have a voice. Alhamdulillah, now they have a voice, and may Allah bless CISNA, and may Allah bless ISLA, and may Allah bless everybody who's contributing, inshallah.
I mean, absolutely. I see Dr. Seema wants to respond to that.
I was going to take us back a bit. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much, Sister Isra, for doing this. Dr. Burfkhani. I'm always confusing the syllables. Alhamdulillah, you know, Karen Keyworth started us down the path of gathering data. I always want to have that opportunity to give her that credit. She wanted to know how many of them were fundraising for a new building. Do you remember that question? But I have to say that if you really stop and ponder what's happening now, I said this to Shaza about an hour and a half ago, look at the participation and the amount of loyalty to knowing our story before we tell our story that we're enjoying now. The COVID pushed us to be meeting like this. And alhamdulillah, there are many, many, you know, reasons why we could gather this data. And because it was a pulse survey, as Shaza said, it had to be quick. But ISLA's agenda has long been research. We've had this for a long time. We didn't always get a grant or someone to help us to be able to fund it. So this was part of, you know, and I will let Shaza explain some of that if she wants to go that deep, but we have several projects that are part of grants or part of other, you know, funds or resources. I think you mentioned the IRB, you know, the right to do research. We're doing things legitimately here at the ISLA. Many of us have doctorates. Many of us have long ago done our doctorates and done our research and tried to, you know, focus it on Islamic schools and find out what are they really about. And I just want to close with this and say that this demographic information that we got and we talked about today is really just the baseline demographic. There is so much more that we want to get from you and understand so that we can tell even more. Because, you know, remember we said we were going to go on this trajectory of Islamic schools being the best schools in the nation. And we didn't start there. So we have to know where we are and what we have to do. And I suspect most boards will be changing in the next few years, because 25 and 30 years of manning your school as a board chair and group of board members, we don't live forever. So, you know, alhamdulillah, I'm so happy to see the group. I'm so happy you all participated and help us, you know, support us to keep moving, inshallah. And I'm actually going to get in my car now, Shaza. I promised I'd be in my car. I have to go somewhere. But anyway, it's wonderful to see you, and thank you again, Isra and Shaza.
Thank you all. Yeah, and so, and also another point. So these pulse surveys, because they are not interacting with human subjects, a lot of times surveys aren't considered human requiring IRB approval, since they're not engaged in that kind of human subject interaction. But we do seek IRB approval for other studies like our alumni research. I do see Matthew. Do you want to unmute, or anyone else who's put in comments here about the report in particular?
I have a question for Sister Isra. A lot of her comparison was between Islamic schools to other private schools. Did you find big difference in many areas, and what are the areas that caught your eyes?
Thank you so much for your question. So the data that I could find, I compared it. But for example, for some of the indicators like admin licenses, I was not able to find that information. But I found information regarding male versus female principals, regarding pay and education experience, and several other indicators. But the data is not vast. So whatever I could find, I tried to link and make comparisons.
So you found like 80% of Islamic schools have female principals. How about other like private schools in general? What is the percent of principals that are females?
Yes, so in the average private school in the US, 58% are female.
Okay. Still
Yeah.
majority, not as big.
Yeah, so we have a much higher percentage as females.
And I did, I don't know where this research was. I think I was either in a presentation or I read it somewhere, so I'll find it. But it is becoming an increasingly feminized field, even in principalship. So that is also data to look at. It's just the trends and trajectories.
Thank you. That's interesting.
I wanted to share an anecdote about salaries. I think I read in a medical journal a few years back that there's a huge disparity between female and male physicians. And the number one reason was that male physicians asked for more. And I thought that was interesting. And I think the humility of people in our community in general, but women especially, that may have an impact on that. We feel like it's our responsibility, it's an amana, it's something we should be doing. So sometimes it makes it difficult to ask for more.
Yeah.
Allahu Alam.
Layla, it's such a good point because, in asking about the principals who were receiving less than 25,000, so there were at least 3 people that I was able to confirm, 3 separate people that voluntarily choose not to take a salary. And in having that conversation, not speaking about anyone specifically, right, in a confidential manner, just discussing with other principals, we were kind of speculating on it. And in that discussion, one other principal mentioned, well, I originally didn't take a pay because I couldn't then, as a principal, afford to hire other staff. So as the founding principal, they chose not to do it. But a really good point about females in general, Muslim or otherwise, and in many different fields, just not even asking for that. And I feel like with Muslims, sometimes it's like, oh, no, you don't have to. Like, I know, we know that, right? Like, anecdotally speaking, how many conversations that we end.
There's also the notion that they're secondary income earners, which is not true anymore. Like, we live in a society that women are a lot of times the head of households. But just like, and this is my take on it, and nobody really asked me, but just like women, all these women that work in Islamic schools, the men that work in Islamic schools, we're all part of, most of us are part of 2 household incomes. The same should be said for the men who also work in Islamic schools. They can also be part of 2 household incomes, and it's not the school's responsibility to pay more because someone is considered head of household. In my experience, that is the number one approach that men use when they ask for more money. And it's, I'm the head, I have to take care of my family. Well, and it should not be a reason, like you said, there should not be a disparity based on gender.
How do you explain that to principals who make such a low salary? I mean, honestly, I was just shocked how you could have a principal. Are these guys just volunteering their time? Because it's not possible that a principal is making $25,000. Basically, I don't even have staff members in my school who make this low salary.
I mean, actually, that's what one of the principals said, was that I was making less than my staff at some point, and had a mentor tell them that, you shouldn't set the precedence. And in speaking to at least one of the principals who, yes, she was a volunteer, and she felt very strongly, and she felt very strongly about having her confidentiality maintained, because she's doing it fi sabilillah. I don't know what her other income streams are, but she said, you know, this is my voluntary thing. But in preparing succession planning, she's realizing that that kind of creates a situation where now they have to create a budget for, you know, these highly skilled, that there are really highly skilled Muslims who are in the field as principals, and therefore, you know, pay should be commensurate.
Mhm. Sorry, I made a comment that that's my own opinion, but I think boards they should know better, like as Muslims, and it's sad that as Muslims we don't have a level of respect for each other in the time, and that running a school is not a simple task. It's not like it can be a volunteer position or a position that pays 25 or 40 or even $50,000. It's a huge responsibility and very stressful, and oftentimes very lonely. You're dealing with so much on so many levels, and for boards to allow that, because boards allow it, because boards can do something about it. You know, we raise funds for buildings all the time. Why don't we raise funds for human beings that run our institutions? So to me, it speaks to the mindset of the board when you have, and I did in my.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like even if the teacher would, even if the principal would accept to be a volunteer, the board should not allow it.
Yeah.
And also a matter of accountability. If a principal is just a volunteer, you know, how can you make her accountable for anything? Because she's just a volunteer.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
We have some speculations going on in the chat too that are really interesting, and some questions about further correlation. Like I see, Yelena, your question about, is there a difference between K through 8 versus K through 12 schools salary? So that's part of the ongoing analysis, inshallah. And we have, yes, Brother Matthew mentions, not related to the pay, but just in terms of the support staff. So there was no distinction made in our question. That's a really good critique in the survey between full-time and part-time employees. So they may have a higher number of admin, but they may be part-time. That's a really, really good point. That's a really good point. Yelena, yes.
Well, I'm thinking that, Assalamu alaikum. I'm thinking that a key factor should be the tuition that is charged by the school. We're talking a lot about board members and their choices of salary, or their decisions about the salary of principals or staff. I'm blessed with a board that's very proactive, that's not micromanaging, that values my opinion. So I have a very positive relationship with our board. Our board is very effective, I feel. However, it's the community that feels that a $6,000, $5,000, a $7,000, and $8,000 tuition per child is extravagant. It's extraordinarily high. When here, I live in the southeast. I'm in Georgia. The private schools in Atlanta, they charge $20,000, $25,000 per student. And here we are at, $7,000, $6,500, something like that. That's the real driver. You can't fundraise for salaries, because fundraising is just by definition, it fluctuates. One year you might collect a lot, in another year, pandemic or something, you might collect much less. And you cannot hire and fire people or eliminate positions based on the fundraising success of the prior year. It has to be tied to tuition. That's the one rock of the finances of a school that is regular. Every month you get your tuition based on the number of students, and hopefully the number of students doesn't fluctuate wildly from 400 to 100 and back, except in like a pandemic year, right? So inshallah, once, as we all hope we're out of this pandemic, we can, but our community has to understand this. And we also have to understand that we're catering to, probably like in our community, we're catering to a middle-class community. The private schools that are in my city are catering to the 1%. And the Islamic schools are catering to the 60%, the average. We have, dads driving Ubers at night so that because their day job doesn't cover tuition for their children. So it's a very different demographic. And we need to be creative and come up with more ways for increasing regular funds besides tuition if we want to maintain that middle class population demographic.
That's a really good point. And then, but who has that responsibility? Is it the responsibility of the board, or is it the responsibility of the principal? Because from the data, a lot of the principals are being put in a position to do fundraising and to be the one that finds these creative solutions. So at the end of the day, that conversation needs to happen between the principals and between the board members, because at the end of the day, for many principals, it becomes just too much. Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things that I think about too, like in terms of ISLA, right, as a national organization, trying to reach out to many different Islamic schools and Islamic school communities is like, how can we create a culture shift, right, or a mindset shift, as Jabin mentions also, right, is that there's some things that need to be shifted in terms of like community. Taha also brings this up. Taha is joining us from Intuitive Solutions, and is working with nonprofits and Islamic schools across the United States, and can speak more generally. This is an issue with nonprofits everywhere, especially Muslim nonprofits, the whole issue of pay. But yeah, just a question I'm wondering is like, how do we create some of that shift in thinking about what is acceptable, what are standard, what is...
I definitely agree about financial health. It's really the main, I mean, basically, it's not about a principal who decide to volunteer and work for free. That's not fair. I think, the board, as we just said, and the community has the responsibility of raising funds for the schools. And unfortunately, many Islamic schools just simply don't have enough resources and funds. And it really should be the responsibility of the board and the community, not the principal, to provide these resources. I mean, the principal can definitely help, we all do, but certainly it's the job of the board to fundraise. This is the most important job of the board, actually.
I agree, and I think that's one of the major concerns, is that boards tend to lay that responsibility on the principals when it really is the board's responsibility to maintain financial stability. But I think in the larger picture, as a community, we don't value Islamic education and it's not just the responsibility of a small Islamic school community, like that small hub, to really support the Islamic schools. I think it's the responsibility of every Muslim to support Islamic schools. We do it for our, relief organizations, or, our national, of course, ISLA and CISNA struggle for support because we serve Islamic schools, and we have a hard time when we're trying to just run our little tiny organizations getting support, because people don't see the value in the work, and they don't see the value in raising Muslim children, which is the major mind shift that we need, that raising Muslim children who have knowledge about their deen is the responsibility of every Muslim.
Yeah, I was gonna say sort of, I completely agree about the board's responsibility, and I totally want to piggyback on that idea that the board is also struggling to get donors to donate. It's also struggling to get people to fund and tuition, to raise tuition without getting an earful from the community itself. And there really has to be an entire shift. I don't know if there were communities in the past, I thought I heard something like this, but I can't confirm it, that some, as Muslim schools, were not united as one kind of type of Muslim, and we don't accept like fees that get funneled from a church, from a mosque, and all of it, and it disperses. But maybe we should consider some sort of a unity pool of funding where people, big believers in Islamic schooling, can be donated to one place. I know that's a big dream, but some level of stability and building roots, because mashallah, we have so many masajid in the area. and people are continuing to give there. But what do you do about, what can the board do? And maybe that's something we could do to support them in helping shift to the mindset of the community as a whole.
Can I ask a question of school leaders here? How many of your boards are out there advocating for Islamic education in general? Not at the time when it's the annual fundraiser and they're trying to get people to raise funds, but are they really out there in the community talking about what an amazing job the teachers are doing or the principal is doing, and looking at the outcomes of what we produce in our Islamic schools? And one of the things, we partnered with Johns Hopkins to do the school culture survey. And the results are amazing. Our students are happy. Our parents are happy. They're getting good results. But are we really out there making sure that that's known to the greater community? And I don't know if our boards focus so much on the micro, I don't want to say micromanaging, but just the minutia of running a school, that they don't look at the big picture and are out there really advocating like they need to. All of us, I guess, advocating like we need to.
Yeah, really good point.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Dr. Patricia.
I just want to add to this conversation, because I am so much in agreement with the fact that we need a community mindset change in the way we see education for our children. I know long time ago in the African American community, when before integration, or right during the Reconstruction period and after that period, the people in the community saw that the children getting an education, being able to go off to college, was a benefit to the community. So when we start seeing, and so therefore I just finished that part. So what they did was they all came together and helped that child that was going off to college, and supported that child with money and whatever else that child needed to go off to college. The community did that. So when we look at it from our perspective, I think we're looking at it as that family's child is going to Islamic school, and so what? That's not going to affect me. Well, yes, it does affect me. All of the children going to school in the Islamic environment, in a good quality Islamic environment, it affects all of us. It benefits all of us. And so we could just see it that way, then it wouldn't be such a struggle to support, to have the resources and the funds that we need for our children. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patricia. That is so wonderful, mashallah. And I think that it reminds us that we really do have a lot to gain by looking to the experiences of our African American brothers and sisters and the struggles that they engaged in to, reclaim their education, and especially during that time period. And so I really, really appreciate that. But even now, actually, so that's a really great reminder and source of inspiration for us to look to, inshallah, collectively. I do know that it's at the top of the hour and actually going into the next hour. So I would like to close. I would like to share, I'm just so excited about this. We just got our proof in for this report, which is based off of the last Pulse survey that we did with you all. This is in a peer-reviewed journal, alhamdulillah, and it's not yet published. Of course, it's going to be in the Journal of Education in Muslim Societies. And we're so excited to be able to use this data to tell our story to a broader community. Mashallah, really the big takeaway is that Islamic schools are agile and able to adapt. And inshallah, we've got work to do, and we're not afraid to, look at that and talk about that collectively, as we've seen here. But we need your continued engagement, inshallah. And we really, really appreciate everybody being here, responding to the surveys, contributing to the thoughts and the development of Islamic education, because this isn't a one-man thing. This isn't one man or woman thing, I should say. This is collective effort. So jazakumullah khairan. We'll conclude with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-Asr inna al-insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you all so much for joining us. Dr. Isra, I'll leave you with the last words if you have anything else to
Thank you so
say.
much, everyone, for your time and your feedback. I mean, the feedback in the chat is really rich, and inshallah will help us finalize our data and make those, correlations that we need to make. So thank you so much for joining us and all the feedback and discussion. We really appreciate it. Jazakumullah khairan.